data's been around since, well, the year dot. People in the, the Aztec and the Maya civilizations were recording records on pieces of string with knots. That's data. What's the understanding you have of your data? Is there a common understanding of, what's the most important data sets you need to support the core business process? And if you can't at least put some sort of diagram on that, and have a discussion at the board level to say, yes, we agree on that, and actually we agree on the terminology that's being used, or we need to go and change it, then again, that's probably an indicator that, you're at cross purposes. If they don't have that mindset, and they don't understand truly the importance of data in this modern world, and how it, how understanding your data, and getting your own data in-house in good order before you even think about AI and, technology there, you're not in a position to do it.
Driving productivity, performance activity, like business electricity, we're so to infinity.
I'm Hardy Chana. Welcome to Driving Productivity. I'm here again talking about productivity. I'm really pleased to have the amazing Ben Meade with me today. Hi, Ben.
Hello, good morning.
So data is really important. I think there's an estimated cost of about £14 billion due to poor data strategies in the UK. Ben's going to talk to us about data and its importance today. But before we get into that, Ben, credentials.
Yep. So I've been basically IT for 30 plus years. Last big role was Chief Information Officer at Circle Health Group, going through transformation, changes of ownership, and COVID, of course, which was an interesting time. But basically, lots of stuff there about transforming the organisation, getting the most out of data, and then basically set up on my own about 2.5 years ago when I moved on from Circle with my own little consultancy, sort of looking into to strategy, governance, management, and particularly around what I call information fitness, which is everything that goes around that.
Brilliant. So you've had lots of corporate experience, but also experience with smaller clients, understanding the challenges of understanding data and how it fits in. It's like the fabric of an organisation, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I looked at when I moved on from Circle and was looking at what I wanted to do next. I'd always wanted to sort of have a go at my own consultancy. And I also sort of looked at, okay, well, what's information for? And I could only think of really three things. And that was decision making, action taking, and record keeping. And information is what connects those three things together. And, my view and what I try and bring to organizations of all shapes and sizes is if you get that understanding right across the business and you understand your data properly, then you will become more productive because you connect those things faster. You can make faster decisions, therefore drive better actions, and also be sensible about, what you choose to keep records of.
Okay, so let's break that down then and unpack each of the three, if you don't mind. So starting from the top, if you unpack that, help me understand why it's important, and what are the benefits or disadvantages of not sort of taking on board sort of that particular aspect of data.
So decision making, you mean? Or?
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every business, every individual, when you're driving down the road here, you're making decisions about the information that's coming at you. How you're going to turn the steering wheel and whatever. If it's foggy, you're going to go slower. Whereas if it's clear day like it is today, then you're going to go faster, you can see further ahead. And it's the same with anyone, as an individual or a business. You want to...
So I've got my dashboard here. That's giving me information.
You trust it.
I'm turning right here.
No, keep going. Got a way to go,
So I trust the information on the dashboard. It's there to guide me and support me. But in businesses, in your experience, is that information readily available? Is it of good quality? Are people making solid decisions based on the data that they have?
It's it varies is the honest answer. It varies on the organisation, how mature it is, mostly about also the leadership team and how much it understands the data it needs to make those decisions and it connects the data. And then after that, it depends upon, how well someone's gone through the process of, and it varies on the size and scale of the organisation, how well someone's gone through the process of making sure that wherever you're getting the data from, you can rely upon it. and then it's feeding through the organization, and it's being controlled in a way, and then it's being brought to the right people's attention to allow them to make the decisions they need to make, and also the action they need to take. I mean, I mentioned Circle where I was at. I mean, that surgeons wouldn't even start an operation or be able to do it properly if they couldn't, make sure they had the set of the accurate patient notes next to them.
Really interesting point on that as well, Ben, is that there's a recent sort of stat around, particularly around SMEs, that around about 50% of SMEs don't have a data strategy.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, how are they making decisions? Is it gut feel? Are they making guesses?
I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of it is, and I think a lot of it is being driven by, the pressures of a business, which you and I both know, and have helped people with. But, the point is that the better you understand your data, a bit further, the better you understand your data, and that's part of the issue. As you grow, when you're a small organization like I am, like you are, yes, there's still data behind it, and you know what you need to pay attention to in terms of the books and stuff. But there's only a few people doing it.
Yeah.
When you get to a certain size, certainly as you're growing as an SME, then you need to get to the point where actually you can't just do that and have a couple of people talking to each other to do it. You're going to the size and scale where you need a bit more than that. You need, and you also need to develop and have, as part of your, the underpinning of your data strategy, an actual core understanding of what data is important to the business.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, then how do you know what you're talking about? And terminology becomes important as well then, in terms of what do you mean by the same phrase.
And just on that as well, I think it'd be useful for the viewers to understand, what is data?
Well, I mean, basically there's a couple of different things, isn't there? I mean, data is all around us literally nowadays. You look at social media, you look at the world that we live in, you look at how much is coming at us all the time, and there is a thing about, we almost need like the artificial intelligence element now, which also relies heavily on data to help us make sense of all the inputs coming at us from everywhere, because we just can't keep up as human beings.
Yeah, of course.
And but data basically is fundamentally I view it as the lifeblood of an organization.
Yeah.
But, you step back a bit further, and the key thing that I do is I separate technology from data. Technology is the pipes and the plumbing that we use and the processes we use for doing it. But data is the actual, is what we choose, and it should be a choice thing about what we choose to capture, process, and put through things. Because again, the technology that associates with this is becoming more expensive.
Yeah.
The days of when they were trying to hook you in with free cloud storage in the early 2000s have long gone. and it is, you have to now pay and think about a lot more about what is it that you need to look after or what to monitor in terms of data. You should be a lot more conscious about this. Yeah. And you should also avoid collecting data you don't need. I mean, the number of organizations now that have just been growing their data stores and getting more and more, and they're not getting rid of it. It's costing them money. It's, and it's also slowing down systems, which again hits productivity, because you basically, you've got too much data in there, and it's not useful to you, let alone the quality of it.
Well, you touched on a really important point, and you mentioned AI. So AI, it is on the lips of everyone. It's gonna solve the problems we have in the national
magic wand and all that stuff.
But my understanding is that if you don't have good data, you really are going to be unable to take advantage of AI.
And well, it's more than that. It's yes, there's a lot of people, I think, who we saw the hype cycle of ChatGPT and people jumping on the bandwagon. I think the funniest one I saw was where someone was, badging their Hoover at a trade show as being AI. Because it could detect the difference when it moved from one floor to another. And that's not the way I see it in terms of AI. I see AI as being, it's obviously very powerful. And I use it myself. I'll ask ChatGPT to help me, come up with some ideas or structure something in a certain way. And then I'll take it and do some other bits to it. But fundamentally, AI completely depends on data, in the same way that, if someone at university or school is learning stuff, the product of their learning and what comes out of the quality of where they get to in terms of their ability then completely depends upon their experiences they've had with lecturers, with books, with, all the rest of it and what they've been exposed to. So
well, just on that point as well, on AI and data. you talk about data, it's effectively kind of an input, isn't it? If you think about ChatGPT, it can only produce something based on the quality of the data going into it, the requests.
It is, and that's exactly where you've seen all of the issues in the last year about, AI hallucinating.
Yes.
Because of the way it's been set up, or the ones that they, I think it was either Amazon or Microsoft created a chatbot which they just exposed it to the web, and because of all the disinformation and misinformation that's out there, and it rapidly turned into a misogynistic sort of, and got taken down very quickly. But that's the risk you've got. And
so that's a really good point as well. So the misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah.
So if we think about organisations of any size, but particular SMEs, from my perspective, the data that you're using for decision making has to be good quality data. Otherwise, it's based on misinformation, isn't it?
Yeah, and like you say, I said earlier, when we're driving, I mean, if you're basing your decision making on poor quality data, then the sort of symptoms I've seen in different organisations is where they haven't really got a good data strategy. The core of their information fitness is relying upon quality data sources, and the sort of thing you see there is that you end up with people in different parts of the business as it grows coming up with their own versions of KPIs, reports, and feeding into the board. And it's not too long before they're conflicting and contradicting each other. And then you're having to spend more time to go and unpick, okay, well, whose is accurate, whose isn't.
So there's multiple sources of truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you need to, and that's why I say it needs to be a conscious decision by the board to make sure they're all on the same page and aligned around, I typically call it a core logical information model or overall business operating model, which basically is, okay, well, what, as a group, let's get some agreements at the top about what's most important in terms of data. And then you can start prioritizing. Let's go and make sure that this information about customers or this information about products or things is completely accurate.
Effectively, like some design principles around the data that you want, where it's coming from, how it ties to decision making.
Yeah, and the other key thing about this as well, it's not just a one-time exercise. You don't just design this and throw it away. Organizations evolve. Yeah. You've got to make sure you hook this understanding up with governance. And then stay on top of it. And the other key point that comes out of that, and this is probably one of the key points I learned when I was working as IT director and then CIO, is you also need to make sure that the business and the key people who are running different areas of the business actually, realize that they are responsible for the data. It's not an IT thing. They need to own it from the point of view of looking after it in the same way they would people, budgets, anything else there, customers that they're responsible for. And that's increasingly where it's going with data. It's that important in the modern world that, you need to be thinking about it as a resource.
Yes.
And know what you're responsible for. Yes. And then making sure that you're, getting the most out of it.
Yes. So,
oh, your phone's going. Good timing.
We'll carry on.
Shows it's live and natural.
Yeah, absolutely. Mum and dad ringing. I'll call them back. So a really good point on that is around roles and responsibilities.
Yep.
And one of the things that I've seen used frequently in many businesses are things like a RACI model.
Yep.
So would you use a RACI or a RASCI model for understanding who owns the data and what their role is with the data?
Yeah, I mean, there's a role for that. It depends upon the culture of the organisation and the size of it as to whether that works for them. I've worked with, some organisations I work with are multi-billion and very large, and you need to be very specific and fit in with their RACIs and the rest of it. But more generally, I tend to sort of steer away from that at the core of it. I talk about, well, okay, once you've understood the plumbing, at least at a high level, and what's important to the business in terms of data, and you identified, what the key data sets are that the organisation relies upon, whether it's customer or products or whatever, then fundamentally it's about then having that clearly, itemized, listed, and then getting that agreement with the exec and the board as part of governance about, well, actually, who is going to hold their hand up and say, I'm responsible for that data set.
And often for SMEs, that's actually a small number of people, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not that hard a thing to do, but it's quite a powerful thing to do, because once you've done that, then you immediately then know who you need to get involved in fixing any problems you have with that data. Data quality very rarely is that going to be fixed by, if at all, by someone with a technology solution.
Yep.
You got to make sure that the people who are capturing that data and are using it day to day to talk to customers and stuff, that they're also aware of how important that data is to the business,
Yes.
and they're doing whatever they need to do to keep it up to scratch and good data quality. And if you need to change your processes, then it needs the person who owns that business area to then take responsibility for that and do it.
Yeah, really good advice. Okay, that's brilliant. So that's decision making.
Yep.
So the next step?
Action taking. So again, they're all connected. Obviously, if you can see further ahead on your road because you've got good quality data,
Yep.
you can move faster with your decisions and be more sure about them.
Yep.
And then that should lead naturally to, you can take faster actions. As I said earlier, I mean, I've seen this in different organizations. Circle was very much around patience, and you wouldn't be able to do the operation, and you'd waste all the resources and have to reschedule it if you didn't have the accurate, up-to-date information ready for when you're doing that. I work with other clients who do IT services, big one in the States. And again, you need the right information before you can ship the products or supply the services to the actual the customer. And the other one I'm working with is in the UK at the moment is a sort of SME who's a growing SME who basically is an insurance, or not insurance, sorry, a loans company.
Yeah.
And again, you want to line everything up. You can't make the decision. In that case, they make the decision, and in that way they agree the loan for the actual end consumer. Yeah. And then they've got to get everything lined up and ready to go in terms of getting the loan agreement signed off and going to the merchant to get things done. So, again, it's like anything else. If you haven't got the information, if I wasn't sort of telling you where you're going on the map, you can see the road ahead, but you can't turn until you know where you're going and you've made that decision, and then you need the information about where you're going.
I think key point there, Ben, is that around productivity.
Yeah.
If we think about the productivity of the UK and the huge potential that we have, if SMEs, the 5.5 million SMEs employing 16 million people, if they could just dial up productivity a couple of percent, it would yield billions. But what you're saying to me is actually, there's a really important link here to data, because if you can make decisions quicker, you can maybe grow your business more effectively.
Yeah, and the other thing that seems to happen, I mean, a good example is this loans company I'm working with at the moment. So they're growing. They're going from sort of 30 million up to, they're aiming for 100 million by the end of the 2020s. Yeah. And they're of a size now where they know that they're basically at a point where if they don't start to get a bit more understanding and structure and grip of what they're doing, then it's going to hold them back in terms of their growth that they want to move forwards with. Yeah. Which is why I'm working with them, and also because they know they're not specialists in data protection, and yes, they know about all the financial conduct authority and the rest of it they need to do, but they wanted to make sure they were solid with what they're doing with personal data, which is one aspect of it. And then the other thing I'm doing with them, which is, you mentioned earlier about how do you go about it, the roles and responsibilities, then the other artifact that I'm producing for them is very much doing this sort of high level mapping through of, flow diagrams of, okay, well, actually, how does the information being collected from their consumers come into their organization? Which teams touch it? Which systems does it go into?
Okay, so they can really see what's...
they've never had that before. Yeah. And it's joining them up in a way they've never had before. Yeah. And it's also, I'm able to spot, because of experience and the rest of it as I'm doing it, opportunities where they can become more efficient. Okay. So why are you handling that on paper, or why are you doing it that way when you could just put it straight into the system? And why are you using two different systems? Is immediately starting to sort of get the thinking going around well, actually we can change it. And more than that, because I'm giving them something tangible and practical as that artifact at the right level of understanding for the exec and the people who are doing the do at the front line, then basically that's giving them something they can get round and discuss in terms of what they want to do next.
I think it's really interesting that, because I've worked with clients where you've just described, why do you need two systems? Well, they've had multiple systems and spreadsheets. No source of, actual source of truth. And the worst thing is, actually pulling together reports that are meaningful could take days or weeks. as opposed to minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common thing. I mean, Circle, I saw it on a large scale. I mean, that was part of the journey there.
Yeah.
Was that as you established the better understanding and got prioritization of what was the most important data, then we built on a large scale, central teams that then started to clean all that up and make sure it came through automated and saved, days or weeks a month and made the data available a lot quicker so you could make decisions. And the same applies at any scale of organization.
Yeah.
I mean, the SME I'm working with doesn't have really its own IT function as such because it's not big enough to warrant it.
Yes.
Which is where, again, I can be flexible and help them with my wider expertise as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's
Decision making,
action taking.
Yep.
And the final point?
Record keeping. So it's all, I view it as a circle. And if you look on my website, you'll see the sort of philosophy behind it because you need all three things to be working well for it to get the maximum value and productivity out of it. But record keeping, obviously there's some stuff you have to keep records of because it's the law. So you might as well do it as efficiently and tidily as possible.
Yes.
and then to complete the circle, I mean, obviously if you're making decisions and taking action, then you also want to be able to sort of track, okay, well, what was the outcome from that action? Was it what you wanted? What are you going to measure to try and track the progress?
Yeah.
So, obviously that feeds back into, yes, there's the records you have to keep, and then there's the records you choose to keep, and you need to be sensible and clever about that as well. And also, the other side of it that a lot of people forget about, particularly in this day and age when, there's all this cloud storage and it just seems to be infinite, even though it isn't. It costs quite a lot of money.
Yes.
Then the other key thing is, when do you get rid of it? And how do you make sure that you don't end up with it forever?
Yes. As a BMW sensor saying...
Tire pressure. I think you're all right.
Yeah, tire pressures are fine. It's just the sensor is misbehaving.
Oh, dear.
But given there's thousands of sensors on these things...
faulty data.
Faulty data, yeah. Or data that you choose to ignore because you believe it's faulty.
Well, exactly. Trust and all the rest of it comes into it, doesn't it?
So on record keeping, it's really interesting. I think data losses and inaccessible data is, again, another thing that is very impactful and costly to organisations.
Yeah, and it is going up. I think I saw somewhere there was a stat that says that globally, cybercrime as an industry, I guess you can call it, if that's the right word for it, then basically by the end of this decade, then the cost of global cybercrime is estimated to be, growing to be larger than the second largest economy in the world, which is China, which is a staggering
That's unbelievable
amount of money.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a 101 now, and certainly from an organisational point of view, I think it's very unlikely if you're bidding for work from customers and or you want to make sure that people regard you as safe and someone to be trusted.
Yeah.
You need to really make sure that you can demonstrate that you understand where your critical data is, and that from an information security point of view, you've got the right sort of measures and protections in place. And that's becoming more and more complicated now, because as you start to rely upon cloud services rather than it all being held in-house, then basically you also need to do that due diligence and think about the supply chain, which has become a lot more fragmented here as well. And then the other side of it then is the privacy laws. I mean, some of that data that flows through any organisation's information plumbing and technology that they've got, I mean, that will be personal data, and absolutely the whole world is thinking about, what's the right level to look after it at. GDPR is the highest level, but around the world, the consistent theme you see is that people are aware of that. And also with AI and automated decision making, people are having to take a, more careful step with that as well.
There is also, though, particularly in the SME cohorts, I think, and what I've read as well, is a knowledge gap.
Yeah, and that's again part of what I hope I can bring.
Yeah.
And again, provide a practical, pragmatic method for helping them to understand themselves better. Yeah. So, what a lot of organisations lose sight of, particularly as they grow fast, you go and grab what you need in terms of technology and partners and the rest of it, but you get to a point where you lose track of it and it needs streamlining and, rationalizing a bit so you can actually be more efficient, and then stop it being a barrier to growth in terms of the way you go forward.
Absolutely. And for smaller SMEs, that really try and keep up to date with what's going on in terms of these laws in particular, and your accountabilities, because then that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, and more than that, it's also about doing the right thing for your customers. Whether it's a B2B or B2C area, you don't want to, you want to be trusted as an organisation. You want to make sure that if you do have anything which is reportable or hits the headlines, then that's immediately going to damage your customers' trust on it.
Yeah, customers want to buy from a source that's trustworthy.
Yeah, and they also want to know from an ethical point of view what you're going to do with their data straight round.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we've got 3 really good points there.
Yep.
Around decision making, action taking, and record keeping.
Yep.
If somebody's listening to this and they're saying, "Oh yeah, like Ben's making a lot of sense. He's seen this like a good guy," is there anything that Ben can give them today that they can put into place starting tomorrow just to help themselves?
Obviously, talk to me if they want to. That's the first
of course.
one. Absolutely. And that's what I'm hoping to do and help as many organisations as I can with this. But I guess straightforward steps is, think about within your organisation, how do you regard data? Is it something which is just, you see as being something that isn't your responsibility as a business leader in a certain space?
Yeah.
And it's just something that I'll do. Yeah. And it's just something that IT looks after. I'll go round and roundabout. We're going back this way. Okay, fair enough. We'll find our way around.
Yeah, go back the way we came.
So basically, think about the culture. Think about the understanding of data in the organisation, and how's it viewed? Because if you're viewing it as something which is someone else's problem, and you're not viewing it as being something which is the same level of ownership of people and budgets and stuff, then that probably is a fundamental sign that you need to do something about it.
And who leads that, Ben? Who
it's
leads
got to be the top. At the end of the day, it's got to be the board. You've got to have the CEO and the rest of it. If they don't have that mindset and they don't understand truly the importance of data in this modern world and how it, how understanding your data, and getting your own data in-house in good order before you even think about AI and, technology there, you're not in a position to do it. So that's the first thing I say. It's a cultural thing about how do you view data. And that's one key thing I try to bring to and turn around in organizations. And then secondly, from that, what's the understanding you have of your data? Is there a common understanding of, what's the most important data sets you need to support the core business process? And if you can't at least put some sort of diagram on that, and have a discussion at the board level to say, yes, we agree on that. And actually, we agree on the terminology that's being used or we need to go and change it. Then again, that's probably an indicator that, you're at cross purposes. And the best example I can give of that again is, some organizations I've been into, some of the fundamentals of a business process, things like in, healthcare, period of care or episode of care, it's called in some things. I've been in organizations where you're talking to the top of the organization and they're using the terminology and talking to each other and nodding as if they know they both mean the same thing. And it's only when I dig underneath that that you then suddenly realize they're chuckling at completely cross purposes. And it's only when I bring them together and say, right, let's try and hammer out a little bit of, let's get this written down and understood. Then you're in a position to think about actually, that's a fundamental measure of the business. Now at least we understand it and agree on it before we start trying to grab the data and measure it properly as well.
So you're basically on the same page and you have the same understanding about that particular metric or that particular piece of data.
Yeah, common understanding, get the alignment right at the top, and then you can use that for all sorts of things. You can use it to then, take a second look at your technology and your use of data across the whole organization and then start to realign it to this fundamental core understanding you've got. And by doing that, you can also give it a greater focus. So you're not going off in different directions. You're applying yourself to what matters most and prioritizing it as well.
Okay, so two really solid tips there. What's the third thing they can start doing tomorrow?
I think the other thing is to, the other key thing I'd say nowadays is, don't just let your data grow and grow. A lot of organizations are just doing this because they haven't taken the time to think about it or look at how the law applies to it and regulations. But fundamentally, data costs. And that'll cost you in lots of different ways in terms of storage, in the cloud and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And the same in terms of processing power. I mean, systems slow down.
How do you stop it from growing? Ben? I mean, it's easy to say stop it. How do you actually stop it from growing?
Well, you need some simple rules. You need to make sure that you've sat down and thought about and agreed in different spaces with the person who owns that data set.
Yeah.
Which comes back to ownership again, because how else can you make the decision? And then you need to set some rules that say, okay, well, actually, we don't need to keep records. So it's actually not useful to keep records for more than 6 years after a customer's not done any business with us.
Yeah. Okay.
And so retention schedules, you can go left here actually.
Yeah.
Retention schedules, I mean, it's a boring subject, but when you're talking about the sort of growth you're seeing in data now, which is exponential around the world, and wanting to sort of find efficiencies in all sorts of different places, then actually having a good look at your data and thinking about, do you really need it?
Yeah.
Is a good way of doing it. And also rationalizing, where you're using different technologies or storages for it as well. It's a good way. And also you don't want that exposure nowadays. I mean, with all of the increasing awareness of, particularly private individuals, that they can ask you to share what data you have about them with them. If you can turn around and say, sorry, you were a customer X years ago, and our retention policy says that we actually get rid of data after X years, then it's a shrug your shoulders. You don't have to do it.
Yeah.
So there's you don't want to have that liability around you, and you don't want to have that expense either. So that's what I'd put in probably as a high level third thing. But it's about trying to do this in an organized way, which is obviously what my methods and information fitness approach looks like, in terms of trying to help organizations to do this quickly, and with some external help and advice to get them on their way and get them in better shape.
Yes, I think with the piece around data, the interesting thing is, particularly for SMEs, Ben, they're hands-on, they have lots of plates that they're spinning, and actually data can be kind of invisible, can't it?
It's completely invisible. It's the hardest thing, and that's why I think this concept of ownership is so hard.
Yeah,
outside of our mind, but which is bizarre. I mean, again, if you look at situations where people have been perhaps in the past keeping records on paper in filing cabinets in their particular department before it became digitized, then no one who's a manager of that department would be telling me, if I was the IT director or CIO, that I was responsible for the quality of their data. But bizarrely, when it goes into an IT system in terms of technology and plumbing, then somehow people seem to lose that attachment to it in terms of ownership. So it's just a bit odd, and that's what I'm trying to bring back and make it clear that, okay, yes, we may have been very clever over the last 30 years in terms of the development of technology and the amount of data and the rest of it, but there's some fundamentals here. I mean, data's been around since, well, the year dot, literally.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had the people in the Aztec and the Maya civilizations were recording records on pieces of string with knots. That's data.
Yes.
Being used to support their decision making and their record keeping and their action taking.
Fabulous.
So,
okay. So, and we're not recommending pieces of string, are we?
No. No. The different type of qubits and things like that.
I think that's just so powerful. Is make sure it's not invisible to your organisation. Have an understanding of the data that you're talking about, so there's a single understanding as opposed to multiple views, and accountability.
Yeah, exactly. And that language is important, because particularly if you go in, like in healthcare, this is one area I've got expertise in. I mean, you don't have to reinvent the wheel either. I mean, what I've done in a number of organizations now is recommend that they look at things like, in healthcare, you've got FHIR, which is a global standard now, an open standard. It's not owned by anyone, which basically is now the de facto, the way in which you should be exchanging information and talking about healthcare data between organizations. Yeah. So if you bring that into your organization internally, as well as externally, then you also make it much easier for you to be able to digitally interoperate and talk to other organizations as well. So, why reinvent the wheel? There are things out there that can help you, but it all comes from having that commitment at the top to develop that clear, common understanding and terminology. And it helps to get, as I said, not just the exec, but the rest of the organization on the same page as well, which again speeds up the understanding and the conversations internally.
Brilliant, Ben. What a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed that. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem.
I think that it's really pricked up my ears, and I think for the viewers as well, it's something that's a really interesting subject, but also vitally important as well. I'm just going to slow down because I'm...
You try not to run over a bin man.
Yeah. And please like, share, subscribe, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to Ben Meade.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Driving productivity, performance activity, like business electricity, we're so to infinity.